to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, Hoops fans? Back at it with another New York Knicks video, and in this video I'm going to dive into the rumors that came out yesterday regarding Bradley Beal and the fact that the New York Knicks may in fact be very interested in acquiring the shooting guard. Before I get started, I just want to let everybody know I will be live tonight, as I always am, calling the Knicks game against the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think the game's set to tip at 7, so I'll probably go live at like 6:55. See some of you guys over there for that. But wanted to dive into the latest rumor regarding Bradley Beal. Of course, there's been rumors on Beal, but nothing seemed to be, like it was very likely, at least, until yesterday. Now, you're starting to get some smoke. And where there's smoke, sometimes there's fire. Now, just because the New York Knicks are trying to push for this doesn't mean it will happen, but the fact remains, and I've also heard names like C.J. McCollum. I've heard a number of names, and they've mainly been shooting guards, something that the New York Knicks desperately need. A number one option, a guy that could stretch the floor. But, like I said, it makes you think that the New York Knicks and Tom Thibodeau will be aggressive at the trade deadline this year, as they see that the Knicks may actually have an opportunity to get into the playoffs and potentially attract other free agents in the future to come here and play with the New York Knicks. Of course, Bradley Beal is under contract for another 2 years in the ballpark of about $34 to $35 million over the next 2 years. He'd then be a free agent, I think, in the 2023 season at the age of 30. So you'd have him under control for this year and the following 2 years. In cap space, we all know, is not a big problem right now with the New York Knicks. As it sits, I think they have about $75 to $80 million in cap next year. Of course, that's before you extend Randle. If he wasn't going to be included in this trade, which he very well may or may not be, that would be about $19 to $20 million, which would still leave you with about, we'll say, $50 to $55 million in cap space, and it would still leave you some room to potentially bring in another piece. Now, the question would be, if you were to bring in Bradley Beal, and we're going to get into some of the quotes, what would be the asking price, and what would you be willing to give up as a New York Knicks fan? We do have some expiring contracts, which I would assume would be included in this trade. Contracts coming off the books, like Alec Burks, Elfrid Payton, things like that, that would give them cap flexibility if they were to trade them to the New York Knicks. Of course, that being the Washington Wizards. Of course, they'd want a lot more than that, though. They'd want some guys with young talent. But we did read stories after Kevin Knox and Frank Ntilikina weren't included in the trade for Derrick Rose that they may be saving them for a trade such as this. Of course, they could not be the centerpiece of this trade. I think you'd have to give up at least one pretty big name, and I'm going to get into what those names may be. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was this. This is about Julius Randle, actually, and coming into the year, a lot of people, myself included, thought that Randle was not going to be a part of the future of this team, and he may or may not be, right? They'd have to think if they're, eventually they're going to bring in somebody big on this team, whether it be trade, whether it be free agency, and they're going to have to think, how will Randle fit with that player? You also have to think, if Obi Toppin is in the long-term plans, which he may or may not be, how does he fit with him? But according to this, and I think obviously it's much more likely today than it was at the beginning of the year that Randle very well may be in the long-term plans, the New York Knicks have no plans of moving on from Julius Randle anytime soon. This coming from Ian Begley. There are prominent members of the Knicks organization that feel Randle is part of this young core, and they're trying to move forward with it. So that would make you think that they'll extend him after this year on the $19 million, and then if he continues to play better, you would think he'd be in the long-term plans of this New York Knicks team, and maybe they extend him and give him a bigger contract. But, of course, we still got another year to let everything play out and see if he can continue this level of production. Julius Randle also came out and said, I read a couple of quotes this week, that he feels like New York got the best out of him. The pressure that comes from playing in New York, and we all know that not everybody can perform under the bright lights. As far as the news about Bradley Beal, this coming from Stephen Bondy from the New York Daily News, and he was citing Michael Kay, who said it on his local radio show, things that he heard from inside the New York Knicks organization. Knicks executive Worldwide Wes is trying to steer Bradley Beal to the New York Knicks through back channels, according to real Michael Kay. And of course, Worldwide Wes, if you're an NBA fan, you know that name. He was associated with LeBron James. He's a guy that does a lot of things behind the scenes that the New York Knicks brought in this year to pair up with Rose. So we'll see if there's any validity behind this, but at least according to Michael Kay, from what he's hearing, the New York Knicks are trying to get things started to potentially acquire Bradley Beal via trade. These are some of the quotes that came out from the article from Stephen Bondy. Knicks top executive, Worldwide Wes, is reportedly recruiting Bradley Beal to the Knicks through back channels. ESPN radio host Michael Kay, who works for the station that broadcasts Knicks games, cited a very good source while dropping the news on his show this week. Then later going on to say this: the Knicks are interested in Beal, a source confirmed. So this being another source, not just Michael Kay, and in general, are open to trading assets to acquire a star player. And that's something, like I said at the top of the video, where there's smoke, there's fire. We've heard that this entire year, whether it be Zach LaVine, whoever it may be. So it sounds like the New York Knicks are going to be aggressive in their pursuit to bring in a big player. And if the deal is right, sure, it makes sense, but you don't want to sell the farm either. I think the New York Knicks got to be smart in this approach, but I understand the thinking. You need to have star talent on your team to potentially try to attract other players via free agency. And of course, the Knicks have more picks than they know what to do with. So if it's a fair deal and you're not selling the farm, it could make sense to try to go out there and bring in a prominent name. They have $15 million of cap space that will disappear if it's not used before the start of 2021 free agency, along with 5 first-round picks over the next 3 years. 2 of those, of course, being from the Dallas Mavericks trade. Next up in the article, just want to talk about this. The Knicks have Worldwide Wes on their side, Kay said, and he's been in their ear of some of Beal's people, and he's kind of nudging them that this might be a time to push for a trade. Now, read for this what you will. I remember I saw rumors come out that Bradley Beal didn't have any interest in potentially moving on from Washington. Washington starting to play better, may get back into the playoff push. He's under contract. We'll see. In terms of what it would cost from the New York Knicks, it's going to cost a lot of first-round picks. We'll start there. But the way you look at this is the Knicks, I'm not too scared about the picks, especially if you're anticipating that you're going to be an improved basketball team. Those Maverick picks more than likely will be in the 20s. They're starting to right the ship. Maybe you get a lottery pick out of it, but I would definitely be willing to part with at least one of my first-round picks this year, and I think it would require 2 more first-round picks in addition to that. Now, the way that the NBA works is I'm almost positive when you make a trade, you can't trade first-round picks in back-to-back years. So it would have to be, 2021, 2023, 2025 if you were to give up 3 first-round picks. And I think that's where this deal starts. They're also going to want players with expiring contracts, and they're going to want players with upside that are young, that are under cost-effective deals. And the names that pop off your head there, one, I think obviously Knox and Ntilikina would be included in this trade. Alec Burks more than likely. Players like that, Rivers, guys that would create salary cap space for them if they were to make this trade. But the players of impact that we may have to give up in a trade like this, possibly a player like Obi Toppin. And then they're probably going to shoot higher at first and look for players like RJ Barrett and Immanuel Quickley. And if you're a Knicks fan, are you willing to part with 3 first-round picks, Immanuel Quickley, and a bunch of other players that would be coming off the roster to create cap space for them in the future? And that's a tough question to ask. 3 first-round picks is a lot. Immanuel Quickley is a player that Knicks fans have fallen in love with. But make no mistake about it, when you dive into Bradley Beal's numbers, and I'm going to show them to you guys right here. Sorry about that. He's awesome. He's still 27 years old. He's in the prime of his career. If you look all the way to the right, he's leading the league in scoring this year at 32.8 points a game. Last year, he averaged 30.5. He's an efficient shooter. He's shooting 47% from the field and 34% from 3. He's a good two-way player as well. He's known as a good defender. He's shooting 90% from the charity stripe, and he's exactly what this New York Knicks team would need, which is a spark from that position, a guy that could stretch the floor and a guy that could give you valuable minutes in the Tom Thibodeau offense. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Am I going to cry if we get Bradley Beal? Absolutely not. Would they want Julius Randle in this trade? And would the Knicks be willing to part with him? That's another question you have to ask yourself. And the other question you have to ask yourself, if you're willing to part with a guy like RJ Barrett, which I would not, do you think Julius Randle and Bradley Beal are a big enough tandem to potentially bring in another big superstar via free agency? And if they are, would that be enough to put you over the top? Because in the end, that's what you're striving for as a Knicks fan. You're striving for championships, or at least I am. I'm not striving for the 4th or 5th seed in the East. I'm striving for championships. I do not want to part with RJ Barrett. I view RJ Barrett as a big piece of the future of this team, and I think he's only going to grow and become a better basketball player. Would I be willing to give up Quickley? I'd have to think about it. Even though I love him, Bradley Beal is one of the top 7 or 8, maybe top 10 players in the league and would definitely add credibility to this basketball team. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out, but from what you're hearing, it sounds like the New York Knicks are at least interested in bringing in a prominent name, whether it be Bradley Beal, whether it be Zach LaVine, and we'll have to wait and see if anything transpires before the trade deadline. But I'll see some of you guys tonight. As always, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.